Hello everyone, and welcome as BatWayne returns to Wayne Reads. I hope you're ready for another adventure, because today, Batman helps with another chapter of Bunnicula and the Howliday Inn. Always remember that as we go through these amazing stories and read these outstanding adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link in order to follow along with the words. I think my perfect sidekick will be showing up soon, Bumblebee. Now that Bumblebee is here, let's jump in. Bunnicula and the Howliday Inn. Chapter 6. The Cat Who Knew Too Much. Without warning, the sky opened and the rain came down. Lyle and Taxi ran for shelter of their bungalows, Georgette to Max's, and he made no sign for her to leave. Interesting, I thought. Even more interesting was the fact that I was sitting in the middle of the pouring rain watching everyone run for cover. "Come on, Chester," I called out. "Let's go." "Don't be ridiculous," he shouted back. "Now is the perfect time for us to investigate." "Perfect time?" I asked. "Investigate? Are you crazy? It's pouring." I know. But Max and Georgette are together, and if you're clever about it, we can eavesdrop on them without noticing. Follow me. I didn't budge. I couldn't believe Chester wanted to play detective in the middle of a storm. I was all set to return to my bungalow, but the next words he spoke got to me. "If not for me," he said, "do it for Luis." As we approached Max's bungalow, Chester stopped and beckoned for me to bend down. He whispered, "If we could get up on the roof, we could lean over and hear everything. Give me a boost." "How am I supposed to do that?" I asked. But Chester already jumped on my shoulders, and from there to the top of the bungalow. "Oh," I said, in answer to my own question. Seeing that I had no one's shoulders to assist me, I had little choice but to take a running leap. "Softly," Chester commanded as I landed next to him with a crash. "Nice move," I commented. "I'm not as quiet as you are, Chester," I said. "I can't help it, I'm big. And clumsy. Well, never mind. If they hurt us, I'll just go. Ho ho ho. And tell them Christmas is early this year." We hung over the front of the bungalow, listening as best we could. The rain was coming down even harder now, making it impossible to hear what was being said inside. We couldn't see anything either because the door was just a little lower than either of us could reach our heads. "Listen," Chester said in a low voice. "I've got to get closer. If you hold me with your front legs, I'll be able to hang on the top of the door and hear what's going on inside." Well, I wasn't sure this was a good idea, but as you may have figured out by yourself by now, once Chester had a notion in his head, there's no arguing him about it. I held onto his back legs with my paws and lowered him towards the front door. His tail brushed my nose. It tickled. "Chester," I whispered as loudly as I could. "Move your tail." "What?" he whispered back. "Move your tail. It's tickling my nose." "I can't hear you, Harold. Now be quiet. I think I can make out what they're saying in there. Lower me a bit lower." I pushed myself lower an inch or two in order to lower Chester. With the rain coming down that way, the roof was pretty slippery and I didn't dare go much further. "How's that?" I called out. Chester couldn't hear me, so he didn't answer. Apparently it had worked though, because I could see his ears were standing up sharply, a good sign that he was able to hear something. Whatever he was hearing must have been good because his tail started twitching like crazy. Unfortunately, it was twitching like crazy all over my nose. "Stop it," I cried as the tears started rolling down my face. "Boy, did that tickle, Chester. Chester," I called out. By now the rain was really coming down, and he couldn't hear a word I said. No matter which way I turned my head, Chester's tail found my nose. "Chester, you're making me laugh," I cried out desperately. I could feel myself starting to slip off the roof. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. Without realizing what I was doing, I let go of Chester's legs and grabbed his tail. He plunged downward, pulling me with him. Off the slippery roof, I tumbled, holding Chester by the tail. Together, we landed in a jumbled mess right in front of the door to the bungalow. Max and Georgette turned to discover us lying in a puddle at their doorstep. "Look, Max," Georgette said. "It's raining cats and dogs." She seemed to get quite a chuckle out of that, but Max hushed her immediately. "Georgette, how can you laugh at a time like this? But sugar, enough now," he said emphatically. "Be still." Chester glanced at me knowingly. "So," Max said, turning to us, "to what do we expect your pleasure, shall we say, unexpected company?" "We were just in the neighborhood, so we thought we'd drop in," Chester said smartly. I was impressed by the quickness of wit. I tried to think of a quick comeback too, but it takes me too while to think of quick comebacks. By the time I was ready, Chester had already strolled into the bungalow, casually shaking out the rain from his hair. I followed his lead and went and shook my head out. "Harold, sugar," Georgette called. "You're making it rain indoors." "Well, it was nice of you to stop by anyway," she said, I guess. She looked with uncertainty at Max, who glowered at Chester and said nothing. After an awkward silence, Chester spoke. "We were sorry to hear about Luis. If there's anything we can do..." "Aw, shucks," Max said, his face softening. "That's really big of you." I mean, if we really can help you out in any way, Chester added with emphasis. He looked meaningfully at Max. Max averted his eyes and pawed at the ground. Oh, I doubt there's anything anyone can do, he mumbled. We'll just hope she comes back soon, that's all. Meanwhile, I'll just have to bear with my sorrow alone. Chester nodded sympathetically at Max. Of course, he said, we understand, and then under his breath, save it for the judge. What about me? Georgette asked. I'll bear it with you, Maxie. Gee, thanks, Georgette. I noticed Chester's face out of the corner of my eye. He was taking it all in. Well, I suppose you're right, he said. There really isn't anything we can do. Just wanted to let you know, he paused dramatically and spoke with great intensity, that we're here if you need us. Right, Max said, sticking out his jaw. I gather that for a bulldog, a stiff lower jaw was the equivalent of a stiffer of a lip for the rest of us. The rain was letting up, a perfect excuse for us to take our leave. We raced back to Chester's bungalow. Well, I couldn't hear everything Chester said as soon as we were inside, but what I did hear was pretty incriminating. What does that mean? I asked. It means it's not kind of stuff you want your mother to know. Oh! Chester bathed himself as he continued. It seems, as he said between looks, that our friends Max and Georgette are planning to escape. Really? I asked. I could feel my eyebrows take on a life of their own. Really? He replied. The first voice he heard was Georgette. She was saying something like, we have to stick together and everything will be all right. That's what I thought. Then Max said, but what if we're caught? And Georgette said, that's why if we have to be very careful. We'll go when it's dark. First we have to find a way out. And that's all I heard. That's too bad, I said. Yes, it is, Chester agreed. Unfortunately, a certain party who shall remain nameless dropped me at that moment. Oh, I said, swallowing. I decided not to respond immediately. Well, I went on, obviously. Max and Georgette are the guilty ones. They murdered Louise and now they're planning to get away. Gee, it's hard to believe that really happening. It's like something you read in a detective story. Not so fast, Chester cautioned. It doesn't look good for them. I'm still not convinced they did it. You're not? I asked in surprise. Not at all, Chester replied. They're not the only ones who had a motive. And there's still a big piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit. Until it does, I don't know for sure who the murderer is. What's that? I asked. Well, Harold, I don't know about you, but I had a lot of trouble sleeping last night. Howard and Harold were howling too much. I don't think I slept at all. If anyone had walked across the compound, much less dragged a body across it, I would have known. But I didn't see or hear anything, all night long. Doesn't that seem odd? I don't know what to make of it, he confessed. Maybe whoever did it didn't want to get wet, so they waited for the rain to let up, I suggested. But that would mean early this morning, when it was light already. Nope, it would have been too risky. Then it had to be in last night. Chester was deep in thought. Yes, he murmured softly. Yes, last night. Suddenly his eyes lit up. I was aware that the moment the rain stopped, and it was the very moment that Chester uttered his next word. The last piece of the puzzle, Harold. Yes, it just fell into place, he said. Huh, Harold? I just figured it out, Harold. His voice became louder in excitement. I don't know why. I don't completely understand, but I know who did it. Without a doubt, I know who did it. You know who did what? Taxi voice said sharply. Surprised, I turned to see Taxi, Lyle, Georgette, and Max gathered at the door of Chester's bungalow. It was Max who spoke next. Taxi, tell us you and Harold are saying he murdered Louise, he said. Nonsense, Chester replied immediately. Nothing seemed to faze him. He said he overheard you talking. You believe that Louise was murdered? Georgette asked, her eyes growing wide. How can you say such a thing? I say it because it's true, Chester replied matter-of-factly. Oh, come on, mate, Max retorted. You have an overestimated imagination, if you ask me. Just ask Lyle. I've always said that about cats. Lyle was outraged. Don't put me in the same camp as Chester, he cried. I may be crazy, but I'm not that crazy. I never accused anyone of murder. He's a troublemaker stirring things up. That's what I say. Let's string him up. Hysterically dashed off to, I presume, in search of rope. Chester stared coolly at the three who remained. Yes, he said. I know who murdered Louise. I just need a little more information, and when I have it, I'll prove my case. Max began to laugh. Go ahead and laugh, Chester snapped, cutting him off in the middle of a chuckle. Yes, my friend, today. For tomorrow, you'll know the truth, and then perhaps you'll never laugh again. I noticed that Howard and Heather came up behind Taxi and were listening to what Chester had to say. I felt myself trembling as I beheld 5 pairs of eyes staring penetrantly at Chester. It was so quiet you could have heard a doggy poop drop. Then, all at once, Heather threw back her head and began an ear-splitting owl. "Ow!" she cried. Gasps of shock went on for all of us. She looked about her, an expression of great surprise on her face. "Oh, sorry," she said softly. "Just not myself. Oh, how embarrassing. I'll think I'd best rest," Howard continued. "Yes, dear, I do think it's best." Off they went, their heads bobbling in the way to their bungalows. We watched them go. Then, without a word, Max, Georgette, and Taxi followed, leaving Chester and me alone with each other and our thoughts. I looked at Chester. A cool smile sat on his lips. "How can you smile like that?" I asked. "Don't you realize that the dangerous thing you've done? Exposing yourself like that. Now the murderer knows you found him out." "Oh, I don't think I've done such a dangerous thing," Chester answered smoothly. He was quiet then, and I remembered looking at him, hoping that he was right, and feeling somewhere, deep in my bones, that he wasn't. He was lost in thought for the rest of the day. In fact, the only time he spoke to me again was shortly before dinner. "Just one word of warning," he said. "Keep awake tonight. The murderer may strike again. Remember, do not sleep. If you do, you may never wake again." How it chills me to recall those words, particularly if I think of them as Chester's last. Oh wow. It may not be a caper for BatWayne to solve, but I think me and my sidekick, Bumblebee, very much enjoyed that story. What did you think, Bumblebee? I enjoyed that too. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us here with Wayne Reads. I'm BatWayne, and I can't wait to see you on another adventure. BatWayne, away!